Jace Harrow had never pictured himself as the kind of man statues were built for Dot at 0500 ship time. He was the kind of man who disinfected railings, unclogged drains, and replaced air filters before anyone important woke up and demanded fresh coffee. The UES Concordia roaming diplomatic vessel with more flags in its database than a museum ran on schedules and appearances. Jace's job was to make sure both stayed spotless. He swung his legs out of his bunk and listened to the familiar, comforting thrum of the engines. The sound was steady in a way his life hadn't been. A small holoframe on the shelf cycled through 3 images. His parents in front of their wine-swept Nebraska acreage. His younger sister, grin bright beneath a graduation cap, and Jace himself, 5 years younger, in a training yard uniform that never became a career. The Earth Defense Corps had rejected him over something so small it felt personal arrhythmia. That barely bothered him outside medical scanners. Not worth the risk, they'd said, not fit for deployment. So he joined the diplomatic fleet, not as security, not as a pilot, not as anything heroic. Maintenance. A polite label for the guy who scrubs the place. Jace pulled on his grey coveralls, clipped his badge at the collar, and grabbed his kit. He moved through the corridor with the practiced quiet of someone everyone looked through. In the mess, the breakfast rush had finished. Trays were stacked. Tables were smeared with syrup and something purple from a visiting species that treated most foods as an artistic medium. Jace started wiping. Morning, Harrow. He glanced up. Dr. Leonro, xenobiology lead, stood in the doorway with a tablet under her arm and sleep still stubborn in her eyes. She was one of the few on the ship who consistently saw him. Morning. Doc, Jace said, you're up early for someone who gets to wear a clean coat. She smiled. I'm not getting it clean today. We've got station access. There's a Cathary cultivator on Port Meridian claiming they've bred glomus. That can survive vacuum exposure. If it's real, it changes half my lab's assumptions. Jace nodded as if he fully grasped what that meant. Sounds expensive. It's always expensive, she said. You ever come down to the bazaar? Only when someone's plumbing requires a solvent you can't buy through ship supply. Try not to get run over by something with 6 legs, she said, and headed off. A moment later, Commander Soren Vance strode in, security chief. Broad shoulders, clipped tone, eyes like a scanning beam. Harrow, Vance said, pausing beside a table Jace was scrubbing. Commander. Vance lowered his voice. You're going down to Port Meridian today? Jace hesitated. Maybe. Need a degreaser strong enough for the Tollin envoy's quarters. Their cooking oils don't obey physics. Vance almost smiled. Almost. There's chatter. A faction from the Scar has been stirring up trouble. Anti-alliance slogans. Targeting anyone close to Earth's new treaties. No confirmed threats. But stay sharp. Jace blinked. Sir, I'm a useful. Vance cut in. You blend in. People don't pay attention to the guy carrying a mop. If you see something off, you report it. Jace swallowed the odd mix of embarrassment and pride. Yes, sir. By midday he took the transit tube down to Port Meridian. A giant ring station anchored in the Orion spur like a jeweled cuff. The central marketplace was a multi-level canyon of stalls, walkways, and suspended platforms. Sounds overlapped in 100 languages. Aromas sweet, metallic, spicy, unfamiliar swirled through filtered air. Jace kept his head down and followed the signage toward a maintenance supplier. Tucked into an older corridor, he bought the industrial solvent, clipped the receipt, and turned to leave. That was when he heard shouting. A knot of people had formed around a dispute between a scar vendor, scaled, and visibly furious, and a station marshal. The marshal's hand hovered near a stun baton. The scar's frill had darkened to a threatening shade. "You can't block the thoroughfare." The marshal snapped. "Move your cart back. You single me out," the scar hissed. "Since Earth signed its precious agreement, you all push us aside." Jace watched, uneasy. Off to the side, 3 other scars stood in shadow, murmuring to one another, eyes flicking to the marshal and then to the crowd. Vance's warning tugged at him, but it wasn't evidence, just tension in a place built out of tension. Jace started back toward the transit line and collided with someone small and fast. He caught himself, then looked down. A child stared up at him with wide, bright eyes, short fur, pale like frost, triangular ears, twitching. An alien species he'd seen on ship briefings, but never met in person. The Narration. Newcomers to interstellar politics, graceful and feline-like with expressive faces. The child's translator collar crackled as it tried to keep up with panicked speech. Lost mother noise, people running. Jace crouched. Hey, you're okay. What's your name?" The child swallowed and managed, "Sorry." "All right, sorry," Jace said, keeping his voice gentle. "We're going to find your mom." "What's her name?" "Momela." Jace scanned the crowd. No adult Narration in obvious distress. No one calling out. The marketplace swallowed voices the way oceans swallowed pebbles. He offered his hand. "You trust me?" Surrey hesitated, then placed a small paw-like hand in his. The grip was tight, desperate. "Where did you last see Mela?" "Fountain," Surrey said, pointing toward the central plaza. They moved through the crowd carefully. Jace navigated around towering insectoid traders and a rolling cart of something that smelled like pepper and copper. The plaza opened up ahead, dominated by a fountain that sprayed shimmering water in a gravity-defying arc. Security patrols were thicker here than he expected. Two marshals walked past at a brisk pace, eyes scanning. Jace's stomach tightened. Near the fountain, a jewelry stall glittered with metalwork and stones that caught the overhead lights, like trapped stars. He leaned toward the vendor. "Excuse me." A Narration mother and child were here. The child got separated. "Have you seen the mother, Mela?" The vendor's gaze softened as it landed on Surrey. "Yes, she left quickly. Said something about the security post." There was commotion. Surrey's ears dipped. "She went without me." "She didn't," Jace said. "She thought you were right behind." "Come on." They headed down a corridor toward a security substation. And there, thank every lucky accident in the universe, stood an adult Narration, fur darker and eyes frantic, speaking to a marshal. "Sorry," she cried, voice breaking. The child let go of Jace and ran. Mela dropped to her knees and wrapped Surrey in a fierce embrace. Relief rolled through Jace so hard his knees almost softened. Mela looked up at him, eyes glossy. "You brought my child back?" "It was nothing," Jace said automatically. Then, seeing her expression, he corrected. "It was something. But I'm glad." The marshal, a thick-bodied insectoid species with plated armor, clicked his mandibles. "Bad day for anyone to wander alone. We've had reports. Scar agitators." Jace's pulse quickened. "Agitators? Like the vendors arguing?" "Not that one," the marshal said. "An extremist cell. They've been distributing anti-treaty propaganda. They hate Earth's alliances. They hate anyone allied to Earth." Mela's shoulders tensed. "My mate serves with our delegation. We received threats." Jace opened his mouth to suggest. They returned somewhere safer. Sharp crack of energy weapons echoed from the plaza. Then another. The corridor filled with screaming. The marshal's communicator chirped. "Central to Outpost 5. Blades in the plaza. Multiple assailants. Scar extremists. Repeat, armed with edged weapons. Targeting Alliance species." The marshal drew his baton. "Stay here," he ordered, and sprinted toward the plaza. Mela clutched Surrey's shoulders. "We need shelter." "There," Jace said, pointing to the substation door. Inside, they rushed for it only to find it locked. The marshal had left without granting access. A wave of fleeing patrons slammed through the corridor. Jace was shoved sideways. His solvent bag banged against his leg. When he regained balance, Mela and Surrey were pinned against the wall several meters away. And in the mouth of the corridor, 3 Scar appeared, scales dark, eyes hard, curved ceremonial blades in their hands. Their attention snapped to Mela and Surrey like a predator scenting blood. Jace's brain went strangely quiet. No speeches. No thoughts about whether he could win. Just the simple fact. There was a child behind him. He stepped forward, placing himself between the attackers and the Narration pair. "Back away," he said. Surprised how steady his voice sounded. The lead. Scar hissed. "Move, human. This is not your dispute. It is if you're aiming those at a kid." "Her family supports the Alliance," the Scar spat. "They weaken the old ways." Jace didn't have a weapon. He had a tool belt, a solvent container, and training he'd never gotten to use for what he'd wanted. "Go around me," he said, widening his stance, "and you'll have to do it over my body." For a heartbeat, the Scar seemed amused. Then they attacked. The first lunged. Jace sidestepped, caught the attacker's wrist, and redirected the momentum like he'd practiced in basic defense drills. The Scar stumbled into the corridor wall. The second swung low. Jace jumped back, but the blade kissed his shoulder hot. Pain, sharp and immediate. He gritted his teeth and drove a fist into the attacker's throat, one of the few vulnerable spots. On a scaled body, the Scar gagged, staggered. The third circled. Behind Jace, Mela was pulling on the locked door. Eyes wild. "Run," Jace barked. "Find another marshal." But the corridor mouth filled again. More Scar. 5 of them, fanning out with practiced coordination. Jace's stomach sank. 8. He was going to die here. Some part of him accepted. It was a strange calm, another part loud, stubborn. Deeply human refused to let the child be the price. He grabbed the solvent canister from his bag and swung it like a club, cracking it into the nearest attacker's forearm. The scar yelped. Blade clattering, Jace kicked it away and snatched it up. Now he had steel in his hand. It didn't make him a soldier, but it gave him seconds. The fight became a blur of motion and pain. He blocked one strike and felt another slice across his ribs. He pivoted, shoved an attacker back, and took a slash to the thigh that nearly buckled him. He kept moving because stopping meant the blades got past him. He heard Mela crying out, heard Suri's small, terrified sound. His vision narrowed. Blood slicked the floor beneath his boots, pooling and spreading in ugly, dark arcs. Somewhere far away, a siren wailed. Reinforcements. Hold, Jace told himself, teeth clenched. Just hold. The lead scar darted forward, not at him, but around him, aiming for the gap. Jace turned instinctively, taking the blade deep in his back as he intercepted. The shock stole his breath. His knees hit the floor. He saw security. Marshals stormed the corridor in a wave of armor and light. Energy nets fired. Stun bolts cracked. The scar scattered like broken glass. Jace tried to breathe. Couldn't find air. Suri's face floated above him, huge-eyed and shaking. Human Jace don't. The world slid into dark. When he woke, he tasted antiseptic and heard the gentle hum of machines. The ceiling above him shimmered with pearlescent panels. Not the Concordier's med bay. He tried to sit and got, punished by a spear of pain. A hand pressed him down. Don't move. An Alaran medic stood beside him, wearing a clean wrap of pale fabric and a calm expression. You are in the Crown Medical Sanctuary on No Prime, she said, her translator, smoothing the words into crisp English. You were transported from Port Meridian after stabilization. No Prime, Jace rasped. That's not nearby. 7 standard days have passed, the medic said. You were kept sedated to permit healing. 7 days. Jace's mind replayed the corridor, the blades, the child, Suri. He croaked. Mela, are they unharmed? The medic said, because of you. Relief hit him so hard his eyes stung. The Concordia has been notified. She continued, your captain extended the mission to retrieve you when you are cleared. Jace lay back, too tired to argue with the absurdity of being flown across systems because he'd done what any decent person would do. But the word Crown echoed in his mind. Crown Medical Sanctuary. He drifted again. Later, the room was dim. No Prime's night cycle. He guessed. He could move a little now without agony. The pain had become a deep ache, like bruises in his bones. Someone sat in the chair by his bed. Suri, curled up, asleep. Small hands clutching the edge of the blanket as if it anchored the world. Next, to the child sat Mela, head bowed, dozing in the way exhaustion forces rather than invites. Jace felt something twist in his chest, warm and heavy. The door opened silently. A tall Nalaran male entered, fur dark and patterned with silver. His clothing wasn't casual. It carried insignia and authority. He noticed Jace's open eyes and approached quietly. Jace Harrow, he said, voice low. I am Kale Varine, Mela's mate. Jace tried to incline his head. Your family safe? Kel's ears angled forward. Yes, and that is owed to you. Before Jace could respond, the door opened again. Guards entered sleek armor, weapons holstered, posture rigid. They took positions around the room as if forming a living wall. Jace's heart kicked. Is something? More figures followed. An elder Nalaran with a ceremonial collar of woven metal, and beside him a younger Nalaran draped in regalia that didn't need explanation. Kale dropped to one knee. Your radiance, he said. The elder gestured him up. No ceremony. We've come to see the human who bled for our bloodline. The younger Nalaran stepped closer, eyes sharp and thoughtful. I am Sovereign Lysander of the Nalaran Constellate, he said. And you, Jace Harrow, placed yourself between my niece and 8 blades. Jace went cold. Niece. The elder's gaze softened. Surrey is of the royal line. Kale is the sovereign's brother. Jace stared, stunned. I didn't know. I believe you, the sovereign said, and that makes your choice cleaner. You acted without calculation. Surrey stirred awake, blinking. She saw the sovereign and immediately straightened, trying to mimic the reverent posture she'd likely been taught. Then she saw Jace and forgot formality entirely. You're awake, she whispered. Jace managed a faint smile. Yeah. Looks like you didn't get rid of me that easily. Surrey's ears flicked with something like relief. There was so much red. Mela murmured a quiet scold, but Jace shook his head. It's okay. The sovereign watched the exchange with an unreadable expression, then said, Our physicians say your body resisted death with remarkable stubbornness. That's my best skill. Jace said hoarsely. Stubbornness. A hint of amusement touched the sovereign's face. We owe you a debt, and we do not leave debts unpaid. When you are stronger, there will be a public honor and discussion. Discussion, Jace echoed. The elder nodded. Your act has become a symbol on Null Prime and beyond. A human worker, not a soldier defending a child of another species. It is powerful. Jace didn't know how to respond to that. He didn't want to be a symbol. He'd only wanted Surrey to live. The sovereign inclined his head. Rest. Heal. You are under the protection of the crown. The royal party left as quietly as they'd entered. Jace stared up at the shimmering ceiling and tried to understand how his life had jumped tracks in a single corridor. Healing on Null Prime happened fast. Their medical systems were leagues beyond anything Earth had in civilian facilities. Within days, he could stand. Within a week, he could walk short distances, though every movement reminded him of where blades had written their story into his flesh. Surrey visited often, dragging Mela along like a comet with a worried tail. Kale came too, asking questions about Earth, about weather, oceans, music, how humans chose leaders, why humans argued even when they wanted the same things. Jace answered honestly, sometimes awkwardly, often laughing at himself. I'm not an expert, he admitted one day. I'm the guy who fixes leaks. Kel's eyes gleamed with quiet respect. That may be why your answers matter. When Commander Vance finally arrived from the Concordia, he looked out of place among carved stone and soft lighting. as if he expected diplomacy to leap out and tackle him. "Harrow," Vance said, stopping beside Jace's bed. "Commander." Vance exhaled. "You've turned into a public relations storm. EarthGov has been pinging my captain non-stop. The phrase human hero is being used so often I want to ban it out of spite." Jace grimaced. "I didn't do it for attention." "I know," Vance said, voice quieter. "I saw the footage. You held the line while bleeding out." He paused, then added, "EarthGov and the Narration court have been talking. They want you involved in official liaison work." Jace stared at him like he'd misheard. "Me? I clean floors. You also prevented a diplomatic crisis by keeping a royal child alive," Vance said. "Diplomacy isn't just treaties. It's relationships. And you've got one now, whether you like it or not." After Vance left, Jace sat in stunned silence until Surrey climbed onto the edge of his bed. With the serious intensity of a child deciding something important. "Will you stay?" she asked. Jace looked at her and saw the corridor again the moment before the first blade came down. The moment when his choice had already been made inside him. "I think," he said slowly, "I might." The formal ceremony was held in a vaulted hall within the Narration Palace complex. Earth representatives stood beside Narration dignitaries beneath banners that shimmered like constellations caught in cloth. Jace wore new clothes earth-cut, Narration crafted, soft against scarred skin. He felt like a man dressed for someone else's life. The sovereign approached him with a medallion that caught the light and scattered it in silver arcs for courage. Without agenda, Lysander said, loud enough for the whole to hear, for compassion without boundary, for the act that reminded us alliance is not ink on paper, but choices made in fear. Jace knelt because it felt like the only way to carry the weight of being watched. When the medallion was placed around his neck, applause thundered through. The whole Narration and human hands together. Later, in a smaller chamber away from the crowd, the elder and the sovereign spoke with him more plainly. "We are offering you a role as a special envoy," the sovereign said, "not replacing official diplomats, supplementing them, bridging what formal language cannot." "I don't have training," Jace protested. "I don't have a degree in interspecies law." "You have credibility," the elder replied. "You are not polished. That is precisely why people believe you." Jace thought of his years in invisible corridors, of the holoframe in his tiny bunk, of the version of himself who'd believed his chance to matter ended with a rejected medical form. Then he thought of Surrey's hand clamped around his, of Mela's gratitude, of Kell's steady, earnest questions. He exhaled, feeling the scars pull tight across his ribs. "If I say yes," he said, "I want it to be real work, not pageantry." The sovereign nodded, agreed. Jace looked down at his hands that had carried tools and solvents, that had never held a weapon until he tore one from an attacker's grip. "Yes," he said, voice steadier than he felt. "I'll do it." Months passed. Jace learned Narration etiquette, enough of their language to speak without a translator in quiet rooms, and the art of listening when everyone else wanted to talk. He sat in council meetings where old fears wore new words. He spoke when asked not with speeches. but with truth. He helped expand a medical exchange that saved lives on Earth and Null Prime. He watched human doctors marvel at Narration tissue regeneration, and Narration researchers puzzle over human immune quirks. He became, somehow, a bridge, and through it all, Surrey remained his fiercest critic and most enthusiastic teacher. "You bow to stiff," she'd say, correcting him with a tiny paw to his elbow. "And you pronounce ver like you're sneezing." "I am sneezing," Jace would reply. "Your language is allergic to my tongue." She'd laugh, and in that laughter he heard the best proof that the corridor had not ended in tragedy. 2 years after Port Meridian, a sculpture was unveiled in the station's central plaza, a human figure standing forward, body turned protectively, with a small Narration child behind him. Jace stood beside Suritola now, more confident, her eyes bright with the certainty of someone who'd survived fear, and learned it didn't have to define her. "This is dramatic," Jace muttered. "It's accurate," Surrey said matter-of-factly. "Heroes get statues. I'm not." She cut him off with the kind of seriousness only children can manage. "You did what was right when it was scary. That's what heroes are." Jace looked up at the statue, at the metal representation of a moment he still dreamed about sometimes. He didn't feel pride so much as gratitude that his body had held long enough, that help had arrived, that a child had lived. He placed a hand over the medallion beneath his collar and let the crowd's noise wash over him. He hadn't become important because of a title. He'd become important because, in a corridor full of blades and panic, he'd decided one small life was worth standing in front of. And if that choice had rewritten his entire future, if it had pulled him from invisibility into purpose, then every scar was simply proof that his life, finally, had meant something beyond the flaws he'd once polished in silence.